Hello, my Pally peeps. I'm on the road this week, and today I am coming to you from our San Diego location. We have a tasting room here in downtown Little Italy neighborhood of San Diego, and it's a beautiful location. I hope you can come visit sometime. Welcome back. Again, I'm Aaron Walker, the winemaker for Pally Wine Company, and not only Pally Wine Company, but Tower 15 Winery and our newest brand called Neighborhood Winery, which is what we're going to be focusing on today. I've got 3 different wines that were just recently bottled from the most recent 2020 vintage, and these are all bottled under the Neighborhood Wines label. And so you can see today we're focusing on Harvest Moon, Dawn, and Blood Moon. And again, these are all 2020 vintage. So they are all bottled very young and released very quickly and very soon after they are bottled. These wines are considered natural style wines. You'll notice that there's a bit of, more than a bit, there's some haziness to Dawn and also to Blood Moon, which we'll get into. These are wines that are getting very minimal amounts of sulfites added to them. So the SO2 that we use as a preservative in winemaking, we use very, very little of that in these wines. And we are doing all native fermentations, meaning we're not adding any yeast to get the fermentation started. The fermentation is all done purely by the ambient yeast or the wild or native yeast. They go by a number of different terms, but it all refers to the same thing, being that we're not adding any yeast. It's the yeast that are already present in the environment or on the grapes that come in from the vineyard, and that's what does the job of the fermentation. So that's part of natural winemaking too. Another big part of natural winemaking is generally the wines are not filtered, and so that's why you see a fair amount of haziness on these wines, which we'll get into here in just a minute. We're going to start off with Harvest Moon today. Harvest Moon is pays a bit of homage to Vinho Verdes that are popular in Portugal, and those wines are usually picked very early. The Vinho Verde, meaning green wine, which doesn't necessarily mean the color of the wine is green, but more that the grapes were harvested very early on in the ripening, so that these are not heavily ripened grapes that we're using. And what that gives us is a wine that's low in alcohol and very high in acid, and so it's going to come off as very, very crisp with that racy acidity. There's a little touch of spritziness to this wine as well. We bottle this wine very quickly after it's done fermenting, and there's still some CO2 that's trapped in the solution in the wine, and you'll get a sense of that as you're tasting the wine, a little spritziness, a little effervescence to the wine, which is very nice and very typical of traditional Vinho Verdes. Very bright, lots of citrus fruits that I'm picking up. There's a touch of that carbonic quality coming from the, as I was mentioning, the CO2 that's being released. That's bubbly, makes the wine slightly bubbly, that carbonic acid. Nice fresh, tropical fruits as well, and very aromatic with florals. There's like a jasmine, and then some pineapple, a little mango maybe. Very clean and fresh, very refreshing, all that acidity. This is a wine that you could make, chill it down, get it really cold, and then just crush this on a hot summer day. This is a wine that's meant to be refreshing, and especially when it's really warm outside. So very fun wine. This is a blend of 2 different grapes. We use Chardonnay and Pinot Noir, both grown at the Pally Estate Vineyard, and we're pressing those grapes off as soon as we pick them, which is why the wine doesn't really have much color. There's a slight little tint of color to it, and that's from the Pinot Noir grapes that we use, but we press the grapes right away so that the color doesn't pick up in the juice and in the wine. And so we virtually make a white wine out of the red Pinot Noir grapes, and then also blend it with the Chardonnay. Again, both from the Pally Estate Vineyard in Santa Rita Hills. So that's Harvest Moon. You can see it's got a fun color to it. Really fun wine, great, like I said, great for the summer. This would go amazingly with shellfish, oysters, anything very briny like that would work really, really nicely with this wine. Next up, we've got our orange wine. And no, it's not made from oranges, it's made entirely from grapes still. Orange wine is it's a style of wine that's been around for quite a long time actually, but it's become much more popular again in recent years, and people are starting to look for these wines and ask for them, and you'll even see on wine lists or in wine shops there's sections entirely devoted to orange wines. And basically an orange wine is a white wine that's fermented like a red wine. So we take grapes that are usually used to make a white wine, such as in this case Pinot Grigio, and we ferment it on the skins the same way we do with red wine, and all the color from wine comes from the skins of the grapes. You know, the juice inside the grapes, there's a couple exceptions, but you know, generally the juice runs clear, and it's the skins that give you the color. And so you can make Pinot Grigio as a white wine if you just press the grapes, kind of like we did with the Pinot Noir that went into Harvest Moon. So here what we're doing is we're destemming Pinot Grigio grapes and then fermenting on the skins for about 10 or 12 days to pick up color and also flavor, body. There's a lot of things that get extracted out of the skins. And then we then press off those skins after about 10 or 12 days and let the wine finish fermenting in the barrel at that point for another about 10 days or so. And then after the wine's had some time to age, we blend in a little bit of Chardonnay from our estate vineyard, and it's more or less the same Chardonnay that we use in this wine, not the exact, but you know, from the same vineyard, and also picked very early. And so the Chardonnay adds some really nice structure and acidity to this blend. It's about 75% Pinot Grigio, as I said, fermented on the skins, giving it this orange color, and then about 25% is going to be the Chardonnay that comes from our estate vineyard in Santa Rita Hills. The Pinot Grigio is grown at a vineyard called Spanish Springs Vineyard. It's in San Luis Obispo County, very close to Edna Valley, but not actually in Edna Valley. It's in Price Canyon, this little offshoot of Edna Valley, which grows beautiful Pinot Grigio as well as Pinot Noir and some other varieties there. This orange wine is, you know, it's more similar to a rosé than a white wine, of course, just by the color. It gets a nice, you know, grapefruit and floral. Again, there's aromatics. There's, you know, flowers, rose petals. There's an herbaceousness about it that makes it pair beautifully with food. I get maybe a little rosemary or sage. Very, very nice wine on the palate, you know, as far as those aromatics, those florals, those herbaceous notes, those, and then the acidity that cuts right through all that. There's great mouthfeel. There's some weight and density on this wine due to the fact that it was fermented on its skin, so it gives the wine a little more tannin than a typical white wine. And just very easy drinking. Again, you know, you could really enjoy this with, you know, on a hot summer day right after you have a bottle of Harvest Moon. It's, you know, something that's meant to be chilled down, served nice and cold, and is easy drinking. It's also low in alcohol, made with native fermentation. And entirely, you know, both of these wines are barrel aged in entirely in neutral oak, meaning older used barrels that don't give off an oak flavor to the wine. And we use some stainless steel barrels, these giant drums that are the same size as the oak barrels. And then we age in both those types of vessels and then blend it all together prior to the bottling. So that's Dawn. Very fun wine. And lastly, we're going to check out Blood Moon. And these, you know, just as I'm opening this, all of these wines are made in very limited quantities. And this is only the second vintage that we've made any of these wines. 2019 was the first vintage where we started playing around with these blends and these styles of wine. In 2019, with that vintage, we made about 50 cases each of these wines, maybe as much as 100 cases of the Dawn. But in 2020, we kind of more or less doubled the production on each of these wines, so that now we're making 100 or 110 cases of each of these wines, and maybe about 150 cases of Dawn. And so they're still very, very small production, and but we are growing them because there is a demand for these wines, and people are these wines are really starting to catch on with people that are looking for these styles of wines, which are, what I would consider less traditional in terms of winemaking. And the rest of the wines that we make under the Pally and Tower 15 brands, these are definitely a departure from those wines. These are made in the natural style, as I was mentioning. We're not filtering. And then to get even more different, unconventional, with Blood Moon, we're doing a fair amount of carbonic fermentation. And actually, I neglected to mention on the Dawn, we also did some of the Pinot Grigio in a carbonic method, and that made it into this wine as well. And so carbonic fermentation is much different than your traditional, what we consider aerobic fermentation. Your traditional aerobic fermentation requires a lot of oxygen. The yeast require the oxygen in order to do the job of consuming the sugars and turning it into alcohol. Excuse me. In a carbonic maceration or fermentation, it's an anaerobic state that the grapes are kept in, and so you're actually eliminating all oxygen. And so you take the grapes, the whole grapes, the clusters, you don't crush or destem, you want them whole and intact. You want as many of the berries whole as possible, and then you put that all into a whatever vessel you're using. In our case, it's a small tank, and it's sealed up tight, and we add a bunch of CO2 into the tank to displace all of the oxygen. And what happens is that the yeast, again, these native yeasts that are on the grapes, they actually penetrate in through the skins of the grapes and do their work of consuming the sugar, converting it to alcohol and CO2 inside each individual grape berry. That happens. So these grapes stay intact, and meanwhile the yeast are in there chewing up all that sugar and turning it into wine and alcohol. And so that goes on for anywhere from 1 to 2 weeks. At least that's how we do it. Some people do it longer. And then after a couple weeks, whenever you think it's ready, then you press all the grapes and to squeeze out all the what is now wine, and let that age for a short period of time. So we're only aging this just for a few months. All three of these wines are very short age barrel aging times. This is a blend of Syrah and Sangiovese, and we have a little bit of Pinot Noir blended in here as well, which I don't think, oh yeah, we did put it on the label this time. So yeah, it's those 3 grapes, and they come from 3 different vineyards. Carbonic maceration is going to give you a much lighter style red wine that's not nearly as extracted, meaning it doesn't have as much color, it doesn't have as much body, not as much tannin, and that's all very intentional when we make wine in this style. It produces a wine that's light, aromatic, floral, very light red fruits, not the dark, rich, ripe red fruits. And it is a wine that's intended to be served chilled. So this is a chillable red wine is the best way to drink this. Very pretty nose. There's a little bit of a savory quality going on there. You even get like a little bit of a leather. But there's pepper, like a white pepper, and raspberries, strawberries, a touch of grass, like fresh mowed grass. And then on the palate, it's got a very interesting umami, savory quality going on, and it's definitely got those light red fruits again, great acidity, long lingering finish. Really, really fun red wine, definitely enjoyable, as I said, as a chilled red wine. So I highly recommend you chill this one down a little bit as you enjoy it, or before you enjoy it. So that about does it today. I hope you are enjoying exploring these new wines as much as we enjoy making them and putting them out for our loyal fans. So I hope you all are able to come and join us soon so we can raise a glass together and say, Pally for the people!